talk a little bit about what it means to be an ally. So today we have our panelists here, and we're going to ask that you all introduce yourselves and the organization that you're representing on today. Start at this end.
Well, I'm Karen Araujo, and I believe I'm representing myself.
Yeah.
I will say the Unitarian Universalist Social Justice, Faith in Action.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Axel Kirkio, and I teach at Cal State Monterey Bay in the psychology department, and also at the California Institute of Integral Studies, also in the psychology department.
My name is Michael Fredrickson. I'm a member of the Direct Action Monterey Network, and we're one of a group of organizations that have formed the Rapid Response Network to respond to immigration raids.
Gary Carnes, longtime resident of Monterey County, and involved in several organizations, one of which is the Progressive Democrats.
I'm Sarah Miller. I'm a student at San Jose State University. I'm going for my bachelor's in social science for single subject teaching.
And I'm Philip Crawford, and I'm with the Monterey County Nonviolent Action Committee.
And it looks like we're all sort of some talkers here. So before we get started, I just want to thank you all in advance for coming and joining us today. So I may not have time to say that at the end, depending on how much we're talking. So I think we want to start with just current events and what's really been happening. And the latest thing that we had recently was the March for Science. And I think a few of you participated in that. So would anybody like to just talk about what that was like, what happened, and more about what that even entailed?
Well, it was a beautiful thing. I'll start by saying it was a beautiful thing. So Unitarian Universalist Social Justice was one of the co-sponsors, and basically we just said, how may we be of service? Mm-hmm. And it was beautiful and exciting to watch and interact with a lot of folks who expressed to me that it was their first time being out on the streets, doing a rally, being in public, and espousing what they long for in our policy, in our government. And that was really a powerful and beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. And then it was a lesson for me, another lesson for me, to be of service and not strive to be a driver, mm-hmm. a leader, mm-hmm. to just be there to help, right. as they directed me.
And that was a good feeling for you?
It was wonderful. Yeah. And then, of course, the overwhelming turnout. Like mm-hmm. so many things, after about mid-January, gatherings in the public square are magnified beyond people's hopes. And there were way over 1,000 people in Monterey for that rally in March that day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was downtown later on that day, and I saw the chalk marks on where to follow for the march. Anybody else want to speak on the March for Science?
Well, just the march itself, which was between the start and the end, we tried to use as a teaching tool, thinking that, I've been involved in many marches and rallies in my life, but there was never any teaching tools how to do these things, and how do you organize a march, how do you get turnout, how do you organize things? I mean, it's not that complicated. It's not, but there are, especially when you're marching through the streets and on the sidewalk, you have a permit to do that. There is some discipline required. So, and we think there was some responsibility that we follow a code of conduct, that even though we're on the sidewalk, we still have to be cognizant of people in cars and people, other pedestrians, people who aren't involved in the march. And we agreed, we talked to the city, of course, and the police ahead of time to let them know that we had monitors, and monitors had training, and that we had equipment that identified monitors, and we filmed it, and we actually chalked it out, mm-hmm. and we had people stationed at each possible intersection where people might diverge or, they'd be out in the street. So for people's safety and the safety of others, we actually went and walked it ahead of time and planned it out. So there was maximum safety, people were following a sort of a code of conduct, and everything worked out fine. There was, I think, more people than anticipated, which required some last-minute decision-making on how to structure the march. So everything worked out, and we're going to put together sort of a teaching tool on how to do a march, depending on what your goals are and for maximum safety.
So I was going to ask that, I mean, you just answered that question. Is there a system in place to set up marches? I guess there's a lot of marches that have been happening around the city lately, and I just wanted to know, I've never organized one myself, but listening to you talk, I guess there's not some sort of blueprint out there on how to do this. And I know you guys have a march coming up soon, like May 1st, right? A march on labor and immigration. Is there one here in Seaside coming up?
Yes.
Is there something, a blueprint for that, or are we just, how are we going about that?
Well, that's Unite Here leading the way there, and they could write the book. They could write the manual on how to do a march and rally. That is the local hotel and hotel workers union. They are wonderful. Actually, that was my first experience in local activism and march with regard to marches. I come out of that union, Unite Here 43. So on May 1st, International Workers' Day in Seaside, folks will gather at 4:30, and then we'll assemble and march through the streets of Seaside, come back there at 5:15 for those just getting off work or those unable to march, and there'll be a series of speaker program there. And Unite Here will very quickly be able to assess how many people are here. They'll be ready for this size crowd. They have a plan B backup to add additional monitors, people that have already had the experience of being a monitor, and they'll get everything in order. So they're ready for a crowd, whether it's going to be 100, 200, or more. So yeah.
And for those who are not familiar with this march, what is the message of this march that'll be happening?
Is there someone else who would like to speak more on that? Well, it is, these marches are going to be happening all over, all over. It is International Workers' Day, and that's like a national holiday in a lot of places. Here in the United States of America, it is not taken off so well as we have a tendency to go for Labor Day, which Labor Day is supposed to be a day off from work. So really not a celebration of the might and the morals associated with honoring the working class as the builders of the economy and as beacons of what social justice should be and economic justice and so forth. So International Workers' Day, we're having these various events are happening to focus on immigration reform, immigrant rights, treating people with dignity and respect, and really recognizing the driving force that workers bring to help our economy and just help our nation go and support working families. And there are a lot of attacks on immigrants in particular, in workers as well, and on the humanity and dignity of all people. And so this is a counter voice to that's going on at the national level, and showing them what's important to us here, not only in Seaside, but Monterey County, California, and the United States of America.
And this is going to be May 1st?
May
And
1st,
it's going to start?
Monday.
So for those of us who may not know, where is it going to start? What time? Do you have that information?
4:30 at Seaside City Hall. That's located at Harcourt and Canyon Del Rey, right there where the Canada geese cross back and forth at Laguna Grande Park. The grassy area there is Seaside City Council, City Hall rather. And then from there we'll gather, we'll march around through Seaside, come back there for a speaker program. Come anytime up to 6 o'clock and join us.
Okay.
All groups, bring your banners, bring your signs.
Great. So thank you. So now we're going to kind of just shift gears and get into the question of what it is to be an ally. And so we were on the lines of immigration. I think I spoke a bit earlier to Michael. And Michael, can you talk a bit more about rapid response and what you guys do?
Sure. So the Rapid Response Network is a new project that's being formed by multiple organizations, and it's to respond to immigration raids. And we're modeling this after the network. Similar networks been set up in Santa Cruz County and also in the Bay Area, especially in the East Bay area. We're working with a group called Migra Watch. And so if you've heard of Cop Watch, it's very similar to that. It's about filming and observing the police. Well, this is about filming and observing immigration enforcement when they are engaging in a raid. And so so it involves setting up a hotline, getting that out to the local immigrant community so they can call it if they're witnessing or experiencing a raid. It's about doing know your rights trainings for people to also understand how to engage with immigration enforcement. And then finally to recruit and train people to respond to these raids and film and observe them, and potentially build a movement to stop these kind of things from happening.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, how long have you been involved in this sort of work? Like how long? And this is open to all the panelists. You know, as you guys are out there and you're doing the work, you know, you're not just talking about it like a lot of people seem to be lately. How long have you been doing this, and kind of what led to you even aligning yourself with this organization and the work that you're doing?
I can keep.
Yeah, you can
Is that particularly on the Rapid Response Network, or
Yeah,
just
yeah.
organizing in general?
Organizing in general, you can speak more to the Rapid Response Network. How did you get involved in
Yeah,
that
sure.
and so forth?
Well, it's a pretty new project. It's just been around for a few weeks, maybe a couple months now. It's hard to keep track of time. Things are moving really fast. So that just came about really recently, and I think it's because of the scare of the rhetoric from the Trump administration about increasing immigration and enforcement. And so that's why that's kind of why that started. But when the Direct Action Monterey Network, the organization I'm part of, we've been doing a lot of organizing against police violence for years now. There was a whole bunch of police shootings in Salinas a few years ago, shooting mostly immigrants and Latino men in Salinas. So we've been doing organizing against police violence since then. But really, this goes back for me personally, just since I basically almost all my adult life, and I think it to speak to what an ally is, just really briefly, and then I'll stop talking. I actually, this might sound weird, but I actually don't identify as an ally, or I don't like go out of my way to. It's more about acting in solidarity with a particular marginalized community, and then if people or organizations within that community want to consider me an ally in their struggle, that's up to them. It's not really for me to take on that label. It's about what I do. What I do control is how I act, and acting in solidarity with a particular marginalized community, and I think that just comes about from seeing that, like, I have frustrations with the world personally, and the only way to change that is to act in solidarity with other people, and of course recognizing your own position of power and privilege within society, and acting as an ally or acting in solidarity with people who are who lack that power and privilege, and you may even have that at their expense, and then also understanding how, you know, I'm also not at the top, so how am I going to challenge the people who are at the top of this pyramid of power and wealth in this country and in society? And it's about acting in solidarity with everyone who is not at the top against that, and about getting rid of that pyramid.
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
I think for me, I wouldn't identify as an ally. It's just more of, I think being a human being is about respecting everyone, and we obviously don't do that. So it's supporting groups that aren't. And because I want to be a teacher, I'm going to have students in my classroom that are going through this, and I have to be able to respond to their needs. It's not about me, it's about them. And I want to support them through that. For me, yes, I want to give them the content, but that may not be what they need at this moment. It's about supporting them through this stage in their life.
Do you want to say something? Nobody? Sure.
Yes, what would you like me to say?
I was thinking, I thought you wanted to say something, and so but I guess not. But Philip, how are you today?
I'm okay.
Philip, yeah, sure.
So, well, to follow up on the theme here, Michael talked about there's people at the top, and so wealth and power and status in this society is very highly concentrated. It's become more and more highly concentrated since about the 70s. And the reality is that Lenin and Marx talked about the dictatorship of the proletariat. We essentially have a dictatorship of the 1%. I mean, the 1% essentially controls every institution. And it's really a question of the rest of us against that plutocracy. So being an ally to me isn't about so much about, and I think some people, not necessarily anyone in this room, but I mean, I've heard it expressed as, well, I've got power and that person doesn't, and it's kind of this condescending thing of I'm going to reach down and help that person. I think it is more of a thing of solidarity, of recognizing that we are in this together, that being an ally means making common cause with, and that we cannot possibly achieve what we need to achieve if we don't make common cause with people who aren't more or less just like us. In this county, there's a big separation between people who speak English and people who speak Spanish. And there's not a lot of history of those people working together. So in terms of being an activist, I think a good rule of thumb is if you're in a meeting and you look around and 40 to 50% of the people in the room aren't Spanish speaking, or approximately half of the people in the room, significantly more than half of the people in the room are one gender, you're not doing it right. And that's, I think, for us, any of us as activists, to accomplish what we want to accomplish and really what we need to accomplish, we have to make common cause with people who aren't necessarily the people that we had a beer with last night. For those of us who drink beer.
Anybody want to add to that?
Do you want to?
I kind of said it in my already about the night here.
Okay. Yeah, I'll talk to speak to that point. I really like what you said about the the self-proclaimed ally, and then being invited in to form an alliance with folks. One of the things I'm involved in personally is as we think about the Trump administration and we think about all the groups that are being essentially stripped of rights, are for me personally is the issue of transgender rights. And so and that's because I identify myself as a transgender man. And so two things that come to mind that are related to that are also happening on the national level are the healthcare issue and access, and then also documentation. So lots of folks who identify as transgender don't have documentation that matches their physical gender presentation. And so that's related to the healthcare issue in that, healthcare often for trans folks gets, spoken about in a way that is different somehow than just regular healthcare. And so healthcare is healthcare, and body parts are body parts. And so we need to, I think part of the larger scale advocacy and activism and allyship is to inform medical professionals and folks who are, working with legislation, so that we can not necessarily just have folks who are transgender trying to fight for themselves literally every interaction with a healthcare professional, or some sort of the DMV, or everyday practices that some of us might not think about when our documentation doesn't match our identity. And so that has been a struggle for me and a lot of other folks in terms of wanting to put trans folks in a different category when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to identity, when it comes to, and so it's, if we can think about it as just expanding our own understanding and knowledge of what it means to be an ally, and what it means to be invited in to be an ally, or what it means to not bring our own ideologies into a particular venue or situation, that I think is step number one. For a lot of folks who even consider themselves activists, right? And so that's just one place that I'm, stepping into this, but there are all kinds of ways in which we could all reconsider, I think, the way in which we think about what is the issue with racism and classism and economic privilege and privilege in general, so that we can then start to realize on a larger scale what it means to be an ally. Right, so that's, I don't know if we want to have conversation more about the word itself, or if it's changed over the years, as Philip was mentioning, in the 70s, I think what it meant to be an ally was different than what it means to be an ally today, and what will it look like in the future. And so, I don't know if I just throw that out there.
Interestingly, I went to see the movie In Dubious Battle at the Maya Theater in Salinas the other night, and it's a book about apple harvesters in the Pajaro Valley in the 30s who go on strike, and several Communist Party organizers come in from outside and take up common cause, but they're outsiders. They're not migrant workers. They're ideologues, and so there's the whole debate about among organizing models where indigenous people who are indigenous to a certain oppressed group lead the struggle versus people who come in from the outside, which was the way it was portrayed in the movie, and it was somewhat true in different periods in American history where there were sort of outside agitators who brought in an ideology, who brought in a kind of enthusiasm and a kind of, and who were allies, but they were attempting to lead the revolution by identifying with the people like steel workers or mine workers or apple harvesters or whatever the group was. And I think generally speaking, that's a lot of what even Saul Alinsky taught, was he was training people to go into packing houses or into barrios who weren't from that neighborhood. They weren't from that class. They weren't from that ethnic group, and try to help organize people to get their needs met. And I think that that's sort of been roundly rejected by most most of us, and as you can't really do that effectively. There has to be indigenous leadership that can lead the struggle. It's a learning process for everybody, but the best formation is one that's led by people who carry the cause inside and are not motivated. Though I'm motivated by ideology, but it's not that I'm going to go to join somebody's revolution and try to lead it, And honestly, I've seen that happen even here in this county.
Yes.
And just one quick example, not to take up too much time, but a few years ago there were 3 men killed by the police in Salinas, and the community reacted to that. And there was a march in East Salinas, and several groups came down from the Bay Area, including one group which was, I used to know them as the Revolutionary Communist Party, and they still exist. And there was a fellow there that I knew. So they come down with their banners, and the organizers of this march who were against police brutality told these guys, you can't use that banner. That's not our style. They used it anyway, and not only did they use their banner, but they took it around to the front of the march as if they were leading the march, took pictures, and then went back to Oakland, right? So and I've seen that profile before, and I haven't seen it since inauguration day, but there are some pitfalls to, organizing in our country, and how there are groups that attempt to hostile takeovers of different groups. So I'll leave it at that. But we don't always agree on ways of organizing. We don't always agree on tactics, and that's to be expected. There's different people take different styles and different approaches to where they think where they want to go. But I think currently our situation is one of sort of fluidity, because we have a lot of what used to be people that I think in our general worldview, if I can assume where everybody is sort of philosophically, that we tend to want to protect people and the planet, people oppress people, and the vitality and the integrity of the planet Earth, that there have been innumerable groups working on that in their own little silos. And now many of us have to come out of those silos and work with people we haven't known before. And there's some potential there, and it's also fraught with, it's a learning environment. This is a learning environment right now. I need to learn more than I need to teach. I'm glad to see any kind of thing that might turn into revolutionary activity, because I thought I experienced that when I was 20 years old, and I was hoping to see it again in this country. So not that I'm glad Trump got elected, but I'm glad to see people's response to it.
Go ahead.
May I say two kind of lighter-hearted things about that, and short?
Sure.
One is a call to action at Planned Parenthoods across the nation by groups in support of Planned Parenthood when they were under grave threat right away. And so nothing was going on here that I could see. Some people asked me about it. I said, okay, we'll do this. And I organized people that ended up being about people from their 40s to their 60s in years of age. And, we were thinking, oh, what are we going to do? We made signs, and we're going to sing these songs, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. Okay, so then we show up, and when we get to Planned Parenthood, there's a group of teenage women with their own idea and their own chants and their own idea. And I told everybody there, I said, follow them, follow their lead. Well, I thought we were going to sing songs and do that. Yeah, well, no, we're going to do what they sing. And we just switched the plan. And they had different chants, and they had a different idea. Fine, we followed them. And then there was a melding, and then once we got to know one another, they were asking, but it was beautiful. It was just follow them. And in that moment. And then the other thing was with the Science March, the integrity, kind of a cross-cultural thing. In my culture, there are certain sayings that everybody knows, chants that you do. And so I'm writing out them and coming up with some new ones. And I forgot to when I did that, I forgot to start by asking my new friends, what's important to you? And so thankfully, before we embarked on those, we did sit down and have that conversation. So we reworked that, and it was very important to them that what we chanted had scientific merit and was true. And they did not want this, and they did not want that, even if it rhymed and it sounded good. So like my brother Gary is saying there, I too am learning. First start with, let's get to know one another.
Right, and that's the piece that I was going to speak to, because I do feel that when we try to align sometimes ourselves with others, there is sometimes people come in with this saviorist sort of attitude, and they don't ask what it is that you want, versus doing what they think we need. And so I think it's important, and that's what I was going to ask. Have you come up against, have you been in that situation where you think, because of privilege, right? And you spoke to that, you mentioned privilege, and oftentimes we don't see everything, because we're like I saw a YouTube about privilege, and how when like a horse with blinders, and so the horse can see, but because of the blinders cannot see everything. Like you mentioned earlier about transgender issues, because I'm, I'm a heterosexual, woman, I don't think about documents when it comes to health, because that's not a problem for Keisha. And so I can come in with that privilege,
Right.
and really offend and tell you what you need, and then start marching and setting up, and then nobody shows up and I'm feeling hurt, because, but I'm not really doing what they what you want, and so so how do we respond? I want to know, how do we respond to that? Like, if somebody was to approach you and say, that's not, do we respond in defense? How do we respond to that? Because we are learning, right?
Right.
So what would be the best sort of way to handle a situation that you come up against? I remember reading about Saul Alinsky and the Black Panther movement, and how he could do nothing with them really, because they looked at him as an outsider sort of coming in, and so he didn't really, but how do you deal with that? Do you get offended? And then, or do we apologize? Like, what is the process? Have you ever been there?
I would say if I did get offended, I hope that I would check myself and keep it to myself, because it's not about me.
Right, exactly. But
I've been there,
Yeah.
and my response was an apology,
Yeah.
and kind of backing up. Oh, so sorry, that was not my intention. I appreciate you pointing that out. How may I help?
Exactly.
Or do you need me to help? Or I'm just going to sit here and watch, and you let me know. I mean, various things like that. It's going to happen. We're going to bump up against one another. And for me personally, one thing I hold myself accountable to, I strive to, and I ask from others, I need room for forgiveness. I need room for self-forgiveness, coming back into right relationship with people, expressing and respecting boundaries, regardless of what I think. Because guess what? They don't have time to educate me on their reasons, nor are they obligated to inform me. So let me do that with whoever I need to do that with. But if I want to be helpful, it's wasting time if anybody needs to take care of me.
And I think, and I have a quick story about that, where I was kind of in the middle of that situation, where I was with some colleagues, and we were, it was a group of psychologists and clinical psychologists, are folks who do therapy, and that's their main research and focus. And for someone who doesn't do that as a psychologist, I'm more social psych focused, and so our conversation was about how can we. So these were well-intentioned, professionals who were really interested in moving the conversation forward, and how can we support, again, it was about transgender issues, how can we support folks in our practice, right? That was the focus. So we sat around in a circle, and so that's, usually a good beginning. You're starting to get to know each other, so all the components for how do we become a good ally, or how do we listen, were there. And then the conversation started, and I found myself in this situation where I didn't know what to do, in terms of, should I speak up or should I wait till it was my turn? Because that was what the rules that were set. We were going to speak in order, right? And so as the conversation started moving around the circle, I started to notice that these folks didn't realize that I was transgender. And so they were talking about what these people need and what we need to do for those folks.
Okay.
Right. And what we should do for them. And so all this language, and I was just kind of, as the conversation kept moving, it was then too late for me to say, hold on a second, right? And so then when it got to my turn, I said, so. And I just, I was thinking about it the whole time, right? And so then I said, well, I'm transgender. And then the whole room just kind of, like, all the air went out of the room, right? And I said, but I'm telling you that because I want to have a conversation, And so we did that, but there were some folks who were still like, well, this is what the organization of the American Psychological Association says, and so we had to stop the conversation and have a really big sort of ally come to Jesus moment, as people say, right? Not me, but people say that. And, it was really fascinating to see that even then some people were unwilling to take their own assumptions and bring it to the conversation. And then there were a lot of folks who were like, thanks for telling us that, and we really want to move the conversation in a different way. And then it was, just a lot of awkward thinking and processing, but it turned out I still walked away with, I wasn't feeling that I had been heard, right? And so, yeah, and so it was more about a sort of an obligatory, well, we see you here now, right now, but we're going to do what we've been trained to do our whole lives. And so that's kind of the piece for me that's, we need to sometimes step back and apologize and not have our ego
Right.
as part of that. But it's complicated.
Yeah.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
So, each of us can only see things from our own, we can only speak from our own experience. Our perspective is the product of our own experiences. Everybody's experience is limited. And for us to really succeed, we need to get the perspectives of everyone who's involved, because that's how we get the whole picture. My perspective is limited because I'm white, I'm male, I've got a decent education, I'm reasonably able-bodied, and I have, that limits my perspective. I don't know what it's like to be black. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. And the other part of that is that it's very common in any, a meeting. Let's say we're in an organizing meeting. Certain people talk more than others. Usually one of those people is me. But that limits the thinking of the group, because you're not hearing from everybody, and somebody's going to have a perspective that's going to add to the big picture. And because of our backgrounds, some of us are much more comfortable and feel much more empowered to express our opinions, and some people don't. And I think we have to make the conscious effort to correct for that. You can't just wing it. You have to have some kind of conscious plan in place that we're going to make sure that the people whose perspectives aren't being heard, not because it's nice to them and makes them feel better, although it does, and it is, but that we're limiting our own effectiveness by not opening up the space for those points of view. And I think at that point I'll shut up.
No, that was great. I think that's true. I think, and that's one of the things that we learn as social workers, listening. That's the very first thing that we're taught, listening. And it's not just listening for just, for listening's sake, but it's listening to hear what the needs are without it actually being said in that way. And so I think having that sort of idea coming in is like, and getting what self out the way and my motives out the way and my thinking out the way, I think is beneficial to helping others. And that's another point I think that you mentioned, and it just slipped my mind, but I saw but yeah, I think it's important to, even when if we're called out on some of our, things, that it's important to acknowledge, even if in that moment it's like, ew, I don't agree, and I think we have the need to want to explain ourselves. Well, it wasn't because I didn't mean it, it was this and that, and I think that kind of takes away sometimes too from when people are trying to tell us really what's happening, because we want to try to dismiss, no, because it's still about me.
Yes.
And so I think, being able to listen and hear and accept that, like you said, like you just mentioned, Philip, and acknowledge that, that's okay. Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate that, and then commit to not doing that again. And what does that take to not do that again? Like you mentioned, it takes listening. It takes researching beforehand the needs and aligning myself with people who are actually in this fight, not just coming from the outside and just bringing my crew down from Oakland and my sign and wanting to be heard, to make it my cause, And so I think you guys made some really good points. And what are some of the besides, we talked about the March of Science, we talked about some of the immigration things, are there any other social problems, any sort of issues, burning issues right now in Monterey County that we should really be focused on at this time?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. I mean, we can talk about the fact that we have airborne pesticides, that are affecting the brains of our children, and that Monterey County is one of the most heavy users of these harmful pesticides in the world. There are many things going on. The struggle for healthcare, that the very people who are fighting against everybody having the Affordable Care Act, which basically is an insurance, program, they're going to shut those down, and the millions of people who will be without insurance. We had to step forward with the possibility of single payer, but there are a million things. I'm going to hush up. I don't know what a priority is. Everybody should do what's at the front page of their life, and thank God Almighty or whomever that other people are doing the same thing, because there are things on all fronts. Injustice in our jail here. People, basically a poorhouse. People who can't afford bail. Are being held in our jails and losing their jobs and being disconnected from their families when it's it's an arbitrary figure. And whatever figure it is simply a dollar number. And there's a lot going on.
Well,
Anytime.
first of all, someone's been very quiet. I don't know if she,
Sierra?
I encourage her to say something if she.
I'm not part of the Monterey Bay community, so I'm like,
Yeah,
this
she's
is
up in San Jose, but
Yeah.
feel free. Are there any
So-
issues in San Jose, Sierra, that are front line? And
for me, it's always comes down to education, and I think that's everywhere. Why is it that, the basic of schools that are, in the rich areas of like Los Altos and Palo Alto, certain areas, they have the highest scores, the best education, but then you're going to another school on the other side or just a few miles away, and their scores are down in the drain, and it's because of all these, there's just so many issues with that. And that's kind of why I want to be a teacher, is to try to rectify the fact that not all bad, how do I say this? Students, no matter where they are, deserve a good teacher. And that is what I am trying to accomplish, is being a good teacher wherever I'm at. And it doesn't matter the location. Because that's the foundation point for, those are your kids, and they're going to go out, and they're going to take what they've learned, and they're going to go start something new. And that's what I want to be a part of.
thank you, Sierra.
Welcome.
And I actually had something else that I wanted to say, but I wanted to make sure that everyone was getting heard. So I do think that one of the biggest problems in this county, in this community, is that we're still not very good at working together. And that there's still this group doing that, this group doing the other thing, not enough communication between those groups. We're too isolated from each other. And then I think right now there's an overarching problem that, for me personally, sort of hangs over everything that's in everything else, which is the very real and imminent threat of a nuclear war, which is a very real and very, it's a very real possibility. And that would put an end to all of our problems would go away, because
Right.
human civilization
be-
wouldn't be here.
Right.
So if I may plug
Sure.
an event that we're having
Plug
on May 2nd, this is not a drill. There'll be a meeting about Trump's war moves, and it's at the Unity Church, which is not the Unitarian Church. It's the Unity Church, which is on Madison Street in Monterey, right up from the police station, not the Unitarian Universalist Church. At 6:30 on Tuesday, and everyone who wants to help build a united movement in this community to resist this insanity is encouraged to attend.
Thank you. And as a military spouse, my husband's active duty, I can appreciate that is definitely an imminent threat. And I have friends and family overseas, and possibility of me going back overseas as well in Asia. And so that is definitely something that we all should be kind of talking about right now, because that affects, regardless of our socioeconomic status, our race, our gender, we're all affected by that. And so again, I just want to thank all of our panelists today for coming and lending your voices and your experiences. I think there is room for more conversation like this, especially with the last point that Mr. Phillip made in regards to why are we unable to come together if we all have sort of the same cause, we all have the same social justice at the forefront of each and every one of our causes, then why is it difficult for us to come together as one? And so I think that is more conversations that need to be had in that arena. But again, I just want to thank all of you for coming today, and we appreciate all that you had to offer. And with that being said, we're going to say good day.
Thank you.
There used to be a radio show on PBS, and the guy used to always say,